Okay.
Hello, I'm Andrew. I'm one of the developers at PTFS Europe. What I'm going to be covering is how you can use the accessibility aspects of the Chrome developer tools to audit pages within Koha from an accessibility point of view, and how you can make changes within the developer tools themselves to try and address any issues that are found very easily and quickly.
Okay, brilliant, Andrew. So there's still no sign of Martin. So what do you want to do your session first then, whilst Martin's trying to connect, or do you want to give him another few minutes?
I don't think it really matters which order we do them in. So yeah,
so it makes sense then, since we've got everybody on. Perfect. Okay. I'll pass over to you then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as I just mentioned, the developer tools in Chrome can be used for many things when auditing web pages and working with web pages. And one aspect of that is accessibility. They can be very useful if you're looking at a page within Koha and want to assess how well it fares from an accessibility perspective, or if you're trying to make changes within your OPAC user CSS and you want to see what the effect of those changes is from an accessibility perspective, it can be very useful for that too. So the Chrome developer tools themselves can give you many bits of information about a page, from the actual page itself to styling to performance, memory use, all sorts of things, including accessibility. So if I just open up the developer tools, it comes with Chrome. Firefox has an equivalent. And to open the developer tools, you just press F12. And that opens a window that's very
Andrew,
scary.
just to interrupt, are you sharing your screen?
I'm not. Let's do that, shall we?
Brilliant.
There we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. That could have been a complete waste of time, couldn't it? So there we are. I just pressed F12. And
no, Andrew, we still can't see it. We can see it in your wee window, but we can't see it full screen. I'm assuming that's the same for everybody else.
How do I have to take control? I think I do, don't I? Or
no, you
share
can just
or something. Share, sorry. Technology. I really need to get to grips with it. Let's try.
I always just share my whole desktop just to make sure that
I might do the same. That might
that I'm showing it. Oh, that's looking good now. Perfect. Yep. Thank you. Yep.
Good. Excellent. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. So what I've done is I've pressed F12 and we've opened the developer tools, which is this portion of the screen here. This looks all very scary, but it's not. It is here to help you, so don't be afraid. So as I said, it can give you information about many aspects of a page. So from the HTML itself to information about extra resources that are being pulled in, to information about network requests when a page is loaded. There's a whole wealth of information, but the one we're particularly interested in is accessibility. There's a couple of bits of information about accessibility that you can access through a couple of different parts of the developer tools. The main one is called Lighthouse. So what Lighthouse is it's a tool that will audit a page. It will generate a report of many aspects of the page, and you can very easily just go through and assess what it's come up with. And you can see here that one of the aspects is accessibility. So if I go ahead and do this, what it'll do is it'll generate a report based on viewing the web page from a desktop browser. And this is particularly important when you're considering accessibility, because you could have issues that are not visible when you're viewing through a desktop browser, but will be visible when you're viewing through a mobile device. So you can run a report from both perspectives. So we'll try it from a desktop device. So if I click generate a report, what it will do is it will load the page several times. It'll load it just regularly. It'll load it without CSS. It'll see what the page does if the browser is offline. So it's testing the browser or the page in a number of different respects. And then what you end up with here is a report at the end. So you can see we've got a number of different metrics here, performance, accessibility, best practices, and so on. And obviously the one we're interested in is accessibility. So if I just click on that, what it lists first are issues that it found within the page. So we can just go through some of these, and I'll just give you a quick run through of how it displays the problems, how you can get more information. So if we look at this first one here, which is buttons don't have an accessible name. So it's found one element on the page which falls foul of this issue. If I hover over it, you can see it actually highlights it in the browser window itself. So we can see it's the user profile drop down there. If I then click on that, we can actually view the element within the HTML itself, so we can easily see why this is actually causing an issue. And if we look at this, we can see although it's an anchor tag and an A tag, it has been given a role of button. So from an accessibility perspective, it's been considered as a button and should therefore have a name. So that's why that's been highlighted by the Lighthouse. So if we now go back to the report. With any of these, if you're not quite sure, if it's saying, well, the buttons don't have an accessible name and you're not sure what that means, you've no idea how to address that, clicking Learn More will give you information on how to address the problem. This is the case for any issues that are highlighted, so it makes it very easy to see what you need to do so you can then make the changes. So if we then just move on to the next one, this is a similar one. These are elements within the page that don't have labels that should have form elements. So you can see again, as I hover over them, it's showing you where in the page they are. So that makes it very easy to see where you should be working. If we move on down to the last issue it's found, this is one that's quite a common thing on web pages, that you don't have enough contrast between the foreground and the background colors for elements. And that can cause problems reading text on the page, and not just for people with sight issues. So if we click on that, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Click on this one. That's showing us all the elements on the page that have color contrast problems. It looks like a lot, but it's actually the same style on a number of elements that's causing the same problem, and they're all listed distinctly here. So color contrast is something that's actually handled very well within the Google Chrome DevTools. So this will be a good one to give you a bit of an example on. So if I look, for example, at the publisher place element here, which as I hover over it, you can see it's where the name of the publisher is displayed in the OPAC record. If we click on that, we can see here that it's this span. And if we look over on the right, this is one aspect of the developer tools. It will show you all the CSS styles that apply to that element. So we can see that the one in question here is this result summary style definition. And we can see that the color is defined here. So if I click on that, what we can see is a color picker, but we can also see down here color ratio. I hope this is clear enough to everyone on the page. And we can see that currently the color ratio is set to 4.44. So that's the ratio, the contrast ratio between the text color and the pale blue background. And we can see the little symbol next to it indicates that this doesn't conform with any or doesn't comply with any of the standards. If we wanted to comply with the web content, excuse me, Web Content Accessibility Group AA guidelines, that contrast ratio would need to be 4.5. Or if we wanted to comply with the AAA rating, we would need a contrast ratio of 7. We can very easily and very quickly see what that would look like by just clicking on one of these. If I click on this, we can see that's slightly adjusted the color. So we now have a ratio of 4.5. It has actually changed within the page, though you can't see it because it's such a subtle change. And if I click on the AAA, that has then change the color again so that it complies with the AAA standard. I should just say at this point that what you're doing is you're making changes within your browser window. None of the changes I'm making are within Koha itself. No other users of the system would see this. This is purely within this session, within this browser window. So it's a very safe place to just experiment and try out things. So you can see we very easily just immediately complied with the AAA standard. We've got a new color here. We can see how it looks on the page. And if we were happy with this, we could then literally just copy this style definition from here and paste it into our opaque user CSS. And then that change would then be permanent. So the changes we're making are not permanent until we actually commit them within Koha. If we wanted to have a bit more freedom with our choice of color, we've got this color picker and we can move the little thing around and see the colors changing within the browser window. We can see the publisher name is changing there as I move it around. These two lines are very useful. They indicate where you need to be in order for AA or AAA compliance. So if I choose a color above the first line, you can see that we're not complying with anything. If I move it below the first line, we're complying with AA. If I move it below the second line, we're complying with AAA. So that can make it easy if you're choosing a color to easily know whether it's going to comply or not. So what you also get in Lighthouse is information on tests that it wasn't able to carry out. So what we're doing here is great and gives you a good leg up on accessibility, but it's no replacement for manually performing tests on pages and testing with things like screen readers, because not all accessibility tests can be done automatically. And that's the sort of thing you get listed here in the not applicable section. So these are tests that, or they're things that you should be aware of, but weren't able to be tested by Lighthouse. So this is very useful to just go through. And again, with each of these, you learn more, so you can find out more about what you should be looking at in order to comply with those problems. And of course, in addition to the items that failed the audit, you also get the list of things that it tested and passed. So that can also be a very useful thing to just go through. So that's the Lighthouse test. That's a very good overview of where we stand. Another tool that's very new, but is potentially also useful, is something called CSS Overview, which is a tab up here. In fact, it's so new that it doesn't come in the dev tools out of the box. You have to enable it, but that's very easily done. You just tick a box. I can quickly show you if I can remember how to do it. You click on the 3 dots here in the top right, and then it's in, I should have checked this. Oh no, sorry, it's not the 3 dots, it's the cog. You click on the cog, and in settings, if we go to experiments here, you can see there's a lot of options here. It's CSS Overview. This is the one we're interested in. So once you enable that, then you can use it. So if I just click on that, what this will do is another audit, but purely from a CSS perspective. So if I just do that, what you can see is we get lots of information about the various styles in use on this page, a summary of the colors. So this can be very useful if you're looking at a page and you're looking for color inconsistencies. You may have, if you've got a very large style sheet, you may have a number of colors that are very similar, that it might be better to consolidate down into a single color. So this can be good for identifying that. And below that, we've got contrast issues. So this is the same information we were seeing in the Lighthouse, but presented in a slightly different way, and I think a slightly more easy to read way. And again, you can click on any of these. So if I click on this gray button with the text color, it'll list at the bottom here the elements that style applies to. And if I hover over it, we should somewhere be, there we are. It's right at the bottom. It's the refine your text. So I can click on that. That will highlight the element within the page. And again, we can go to the color and do the whole contrast ratio thing that we did before. So it's just another way of getting to the same thing, but I think a slightly nicer way. So that's the CSS overview. The final tool within the DevTools for looking at CSS, or for looking at accessibility, is within this tab that is displayed when you're on the Elements tab at the top. You get this additional section over here with a number of tabs. One of these is accessibility. And this is really getting down in the weeds of accessibility. This is where you really need to wear your beanie hat. So what we're looking at here is the page as seen from an accessibility standpoint. So this is the accessibility tree. So just as a page has a structure defined by its HTML markup, an accessibility tree is built that corresponds with that. So you can see that a number of the elements in the page are defined as generic, and that means from an accessibility perspective, they don't have any special meaning. They're just there. But you can see that some of them do. And so if I click on this heading here, we can see that that corresponds with the refine your search at the bottom here. And if we look down, we can see that from an accessibility perspective, it's got a role of heading, it's got a level of 2, it's got contents, and you can see that there's no area specific properties defined on it. This can be very useful because just as CSS is formed from a number of different styles being combined, the accessibility on an element is also formed from a number of different properties being combined. So what you get is the computed properties at the bottom, which is the sort of like the end result of having combined all of the different aspects. So that's the real down in the weeds accessibility tab in the DevTools. So that's the Google Chrome DevTools. One final thing I do just want to highlight is that, as you might expect, there's a lot of extensions for Google Chrome and other browsers that deal with accessibility. One of the ones I use the most and I find most useful is called Axe. And I've got it installed here. And if I just click on it, what you can see is it'll do the same sort of thing as the Lighthouse report. It scans the page and comes up with a list of issues that it found. But it will find things that Lighthouse may not find, or things that Lighthouse didn't consider important enough to highlight. And it presents the information in a slightly different way, which may be preferable. So you can see we're getting a lot of the same sort of issues. It's saying 144, but a lot of those are repeated, 42 of which are the color contrast things. So if we click on that, we can see there's 42 of them, where we can step through them, and it'll show us on the page. If I step through, if I go near the top, you can see that it will, or it should, highlight. If I click highlight, it then shows on the page whereabouts that element appears. So it's the same sort of information as in the Lighthouse report. So discernible text we saw before, accessible name, and so on. This one's quite useful, and this isn't something that's highlighted by the Lighthouse report. So a document has a structure defined by the HTML, and additionally any sort of accessibility area roles it may have. A good way of defining document structure is to use landmarks, which are areas of a page that serve a purpose. So the HTML standard has a number of tags that correspond with these. So you may have a nav tag to define a navigation area. You may have a main tag to define a main area on the page, and they're all called landmarks. And what this report is saying is that this page doesn't actually have any landmarks defined. So that might be something that would that may want to be addressed. So yeah, the Axe report is different but the same in some ways, but it's certainly another tool that's very useful to use when you're assessing accessibility on a page. So that's about it really. That's my bit.
I have a question, Andrew.
Yes.
It has been answered, but just to raise it in the forum, well, on Zoom, so the people on YouTube wouldn't have seen it anyway. You're obviously using Chrome and you refer to Chrome developer tools, but is the same applicable in the other browsers?
Yep. Firefox has its own developer tools. Again, you get to that with F12. They're slightly different. It does a few things better than Chrome, and it does other things not quite as good as Chrome. Certainly worth a look. Edge, because it's built on the same engine as Chrome, it has exactly the same developer tools. It has the Lighthouse report and everything. So yeah, whatever browser you use, you should be fine.
So we basically hit F12 and see what happens.
Yep.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew.